I never believed in ghost stories, not until the day I set foot inside those abandoned mines beneath the mountains. People around town used to whisper about strange happenings up there, unexplained disappearances, eerie lights flickering in the darkness, screams that echoed through the valleys at night. I always thought they were just tales meant to scare kids or keep nosy outsiders away. But sometimes the things you don't believe in have a way of finding you when you least expect them. It all started with an old map I found in my grandfather's attic. He had worked in the mines when he was a young man, back when they were still operational. The map was hand-drawn, faded with age, showing not only the main tunnels, but also paths that weren't officially recorded, places they were told never to enter. Scrawled across one corner of the map were the words, "No light, no hope, no return." Curiosity got the better of me. I decided I would go there myself, just to prove to everyone, and maybe to myself, that there was nothing to be afraid of. It wasn't hard to find a few friends willing to join me. Most of them joked about it, treating it like some thrilling adventure. We packed some flashlights, spare batteries, ropes, and snacks, laughing about how we'd tell our kids someday about the night we conquered the haunted mines. The journey to the base of the mountain took about an hour. By the time we reached the entrance, the sun was beginning to sink behind the peaks, painting the sky in deep crimson. The mouth of the mine looked like a yawning beast, dark and unwelcoming. Cold air flowed out of it, carrying a strange smell, a mix of damp earth and something older, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I was the first to step inside. The crunch of gravel under my boots echoed unnaturally loud. The beam from my flashlight cut a narrow path through the darkness, revealing crumbling wooden beams, rusted carts, and rails twisted like old bones. The walls seemed to breathe with the weight of centuries, whispering secrets just out of earshot. At first, it felt like any other abandoned place, empty, forgotten. But the deeper we went, the more the air seemed to thicken, heavy and metallic against my skin. We passed old signs warning workers of cave-ins, explosives, dangerous gases. Some were barely legible, covered in layers of grime and dust. Then came the first oddity. On the walls, just past what seemed like an old storage area, were markings, strange symbols carved deep into the stone. They didn't look like anything I recognized. Circles with jagged edges, crosses with missing arms, shapes that seemed to shift if you stared at them too long. My friend Mason joked that it was just the old miners playing pranks, but even as he laughed, his voice was too loud, too forced. Further inside, we found an abandoned miner's helmet lying in the dirt, the lamp shattered, the straps frayed. Next to it were boot prints half faded, leading deeper into a part of the tunnel not shown on my grandfather's map. We stood there for a long moment, debating what to do. Common sense screamed at us to turn back, but something else, pride, foolishness, I don't know, pushed us onward. The temperature dropped noticeably the moment we crossed into the uncharted section. Our breaths came out in visible puffs. The silence was absolute, so much so that our footsteps sounded intrusive, like we were disturbing something that didn't want to be woken. At one point, I thought I heard faint knocking sounds. 3 sharp raps, like someone tapping a message through the stone. When I mentioned it, the others shrugged it off. Maybe it was the old supports shifting. Maybe it was the mountain settling. Maybe. We reached a fork where the tunnel split in two. Both paths looked equally ominous, disappearing into pitch blackness. We decided to split up. Bad idea, I know. Mason and Danny took the left passage. I went right with Leah behind me. We agreed to meet back at the fork in 20 minutes. The tunnel I chose sloped sharply downward. The air grew colder, damper. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow rhythmic taps. It was when I slipped on a patch of slick stone that I noticed something strange. Scratches along the walls, deep grooves that looked almost like claw marks. They ran in long, jagged lines, as if something large had scraped its way through the passage. Leah shivered and asked if we should turn back. But I shook my head. We were too close to something. I could feel it, a kind of pulsing energy in the walls themselves, like the mine was alive, watching us. Around a bend, we stumbled into a larger cavern, a natural pocket hidden deep beneath the earth. In the center was a pool of stagnant water, and just beyond it, something that didn't belong. Old tools, helmets, lanterns, all arranged neatly in a circle, as if for some dark ritual. And in the middle of that circle was a crude wooden figure, about the size of a man, bound tightly with old frayed ropes and covered in ash. I raised my flashlight, the beam trembling slightly in my hand. As the light hit the figure, I swore for a moment that it moved. Just a twitch, a small jerk of the head. Leah gasped and grabbed my arm. We stared in silence, hardly daring to breathe. Then, from somewhere behind us, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching softly against the gravel. They didn't sound like Mason or Danny. They didn't sound human at all. We spun around, flashlights sweeping wildly across the darkness, but saw nothing. Nothing but shadows that seemed too thick, too solid. My heart thundered in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. That's when we heard it, the low, guttural whisper so close it felt like it was inside my own head. A single word, stretched out into something monstrous and cruel. Stay. The flashlight in Leah's hand flickered violently, and for a split second, in the stuttering beam, I saw them, figures, dozens of them, standing just beyond the edges of the light. Miners, but not quite. Their faces were wrong, twisted, burned, missing pieces. Their hollow eyes locked onto us with a hunger that froze the blood in my veins. I grabbed Leah's hand, and together we ran, the darkness swallowing our terrified cries. We didn't stop running until we reached the fork again. My legs burned, and my chest felt like it would burst, but I didn't dare slow down. Leah clutched my arm, gasping for breath, her eyes wide with panic. Mason and Danny weren't there. Their side of the tunnel stretched out into blackness, silent and empty. I shouted their names into the darkness, the sound bouncing back at me in strange, warped echoes. No answer, only the cold stillness pressing against us like an invisible hand. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of there, but I couldn't just leave them behind. Not without knowing what happened. Leah begged me not to go back in. Her voice cracked, raw with fear. I promised her I wouldn't go far. Just far enough to call for them again, to make sure they weren't just around the next bend. She stayed by the fork, flashlight aimed down the tunnel. Her hands shaking so badly, the light jittered across the walls. I moved slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. The darkness seemed thicker here, swallowing the light greedily. I'd only gone about 20 feet when I heard it. A faint tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone lightly drumming their fingers against stone. It came from just ahead, around a corner. I swallowed hard and pressed on, calling Mason's name again. Still no response. Just more tapping. Now faster, almost impatient. When I turned the corner, I froze. There was something on the wall. At first, I thought it was just shadows playing tricks on me. But as my light steadied, I saw it clearly. A handprint. Large, smeared across the stone. As if someone had dragged their fingers down it. Except the handprint wasn't red or brown, like dried blood would be. It was black, deep, oily black, glistening in the flashlight's beam like fresh tar. I backed away instinctively. That's when I heard a voice, Mason's voice, whispering my name. But it didn't sound right. It was too thin, too hollow, as if it were coming through a long tunnel. "Come here," it urged. "We need you." I wanted to believe it was him. I wanted to believe they were just playing some twisted prank, but something inside me, something deeper than fear, knew better. The voice didn't carry emotion. It didn't carry urgency. It carried hunger. I stumbled back toward Leah, heart pounding in my ears. As I turned, my flashlight caught something else. A figure at the far end of the tunnel. Just standing there, unmoving, watching. It wasn't Mason. It wasn't Danny. The figure was tall and wrong, its proportions slightly off, as if someone had tried to recreate a human body from memory but got it horribly wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. And even from that distance, I could see the glint of eyes. Eyes that reflected the light not like a human's, but like an animal's. Leah screamed behind me, and I ran toward her without looking back. We didn't need to speak. We just knew we had to get out. Now we bolted together, retracing our steps toward the mine's entrance. But as we ran, the tunnel seemed unfamiliar, twisted somehow, as if the mine itself was shifting around us. Turn after turn led us not outward, but deeper in. And the worst part was the whispers. They grew louder the more we tried to escape. Soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but quickly rising into a chorus of desperate, pleading voices. Some called our names, some sobbed, and others just laughed, a cruel, hollow laughter that sent ice straight through my veins. Leah stumbled, falling hard against the rocky floor. I yanked her up, but as I did, my flashlight flickered and died, plunging us into total darkness. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. We were blind, lost, surrounded by the unseen things that had been following us. I could hear them now, footsteps all around, soft shuffling noises, too many to count. Then a cold hand brushed against my back. I jerked away, swinging blindly with the flashlight in my hand, but I hit nothing but air. Leah grabbed my sleeve, her nails digging into my arm, and together we fumbled forward, guided only by sheer panic. Somehow, through luck or something else, we stumbled into another tunnel, this one narrower and steeper, sloping upward. The air grew slightly fresher, and a faint, almost invisible draft kissed my face. We followed it, hope burning in my chest like a fragile flame. Behind us, the sounds grew frantic, footsteps pounding, guttural whispers rising into shrieks. Something was chasing us, something that didn't want us to leave. Just as I felt my legs were about to give out, we saw it. A faint light ahead. The entrance. Freedom. We sprinted, driven by pure terror, bursting out of the tunnel into the freezing night air. The world outside felt surreal. The stars above us blurred into dizzy patterns, the cold biting into our sweat-soaked skin. We didn't stop running until we reached the truck parked down the path. Only When we slammed the door shut behind us and locked them, did we dare to breathe again. But even then, sitting there in the darkness, gasping for air, we realized something horrifying. Mason and Danny were still inside, and we weren't sure if they were still alive, or if whatever wore their faces now was something far worse. We sat in the truck, hearts hammering, cold sweat soaking our clothes. Leah stared out the windshield, her mouth trembling as she tried to form words, but none came. I gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, staring at the yawning black mouth of the mine. It felt like it was watching us. Minutes dragged by in agonizing silence. Every second that passed tightened the guilt inside me like a vice. Mason and Danny were still down there. Maybe alive, maybe trapped, maybe worse. I couldn't leave them. No matter how much my body screamed to drive away and never look back. Without a word, I threw open the truck door. Leah grabbed my arm, her fingers ice cold. "Please," she whispered, "don't go back." I turned to her, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have to. I'll be quick. I swear." I handed her the keys. "If I'm not back in 30 minutes, drive. Don't wait." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, but I pulled free and ran. The cold night air seemed to push against me, as if the very mountain wanted to stop me. The darkness inside the mine swallowed my flashlight beam whole. The second I stepped back into that throat of stone and silence, it felt like reality bent slightly. Like I was stepping out of the world I knew and into something ancient and hateful. The tunnels seemed even less familiar now. Twisting corridors I didn't remember. Sharp descents that made my ears pop. It was colder too. A biting wet cold that seeped into my bones. Every step echoed unnaturally, like the mine was amplifying my presence for whatever still lingered there. After what felt like forever, I heard it. Voices. Faint, echoing ahead. Mason's voice, Danny's laugh. I broke into a run, skidding around a corner, nearly falling. That's when I saw them. Mason and Danny stood in a wide cavern, illuminated by a strange, sickly green light that seemed to seep from the very walls. They were side by side, facing away from me, unnaturally still. Relief flooded me. I shouted their names. Neither moved. I took a cautious step closer, then another. As I neared, dread twisted in my gut. Something was wrong. Their bodies were stiff, too stiff. Their heads tilted at sharp angles, like broken dolls propped up for display. "Mason?" My voice cracked. Slowly, horribly, they turned. Their faces were wrong. At first glance, they looked normal. But the longer I stared, the more my mind rebelled. Their eyes were too wide, too glassy. Their smiles stretched too far. Their skin, in the strange green light, looked almost translucent. And behind those vacant smiles, something moved. Something black and writhing, like maggots crawling just beneath their skin. In perfect mechanical unison, they stepped toward me. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking wildly in my hands. "Stay back," I shouted. Mason's voice came, but it was warped, like a recording played backward. "You came back. Good. Join us." Danny's mouth moved, but the words didn't match the sound. A gurgling, wet noise poured from her lips. I turned and ran. The tunnels shifted around me, twisting. Doors and corridors appearing where none had been before. No matter which way I turned, I could hear them behind me. The slow, steady slap of their feet against stone, always just out of sight. At one point, I rounded a corner and nearly collided with another figure. It wasn't Mason or Danny. It was a miner, or what had once been one. His body was bloated and rotted, his face a mess of melted flesh and hollow sockets. The helmet on his head was rusted, the lamp flickering feebly. He opened his mouth and let out a long, rattling breath that smelled of earth and decay. Behind him, more figures emerged from the walls themselves, men and women, all bearing the wounds of the mine, burns, crushed limbs, twisted spines. Some dragged pickaxes, others simply stared, their mouths open in endless silent screams. They began to close in. I ran again, heart shattering against my ribs, but the mine was alive now, bending, closing, breathing. Every passage led me deeper, until I was in a vast cavern unlike anything I had ever seen, an ancient part of the mine untouched by time. At the center of the cavern stood a massive pit, a black hole in the earth. The green light poured from it like a sickness, and standing at the edge of the pit was her. She was the source. A woman in a tattered dress, her hair hanging in wet, filthy clumps around her face. Her arms were outstretched, and from her back sprouted long, spidery tendrils of black smoke. Her face, if it could be called that, was a mass of shifting features, as if countless souls were trapped inside, pressing against the skin from within. She looked at me, not through me. At me, she knew me. Without thinking, I stumbled backward. I had no plan, no hope of fighting something like this. My only thought was escape. But before I could move, her voice filled the cavern. Not spoken aloud, but pressed into my mind like a vice. It was both beautiful and horrifying, 1,000 voices speaking at once. Stay forever. The pit began to churn. Hands reached out from it. Skeletal, grasping hands, trying to pull me in. I ran, screaming, dodging the clutching hands and the swarm of dead miners that poured from the cavern walls. I sprinted through tunnel after tunnel, not thinking, only moving, only trying to survive. Somehow, impossibly, I found the slope leading upward again. My lungs burned, my legs barely responding. Behind me, the laughter and whispers grew louder, closer, furious. I could feel them at my back. The dead, the lost, the damned, reaching for me. I burst into the cold night air once more, collapsing onto the gravel outside. Leah was there, sobbing hysterically, yanking me into the truck. Tires screamed as we tore down the mountain road, not daring to look back. Only once we were miles away did I glance in the mirror, and in the darkness behind us, far down the winding road, standing alone at the edge of the tree line, was Mason, smiling, waiting. The farther we drove, the more the crushing weight of that place seemed to lift, like escaping from the pull of a black hole. But the damage was done. I could feel it inside me, a deep wrongness, like something from that pit had clung to my soul. Leah didn't speak for a long time. She kept glancing at me like she wasn't sure I was still human. I didn't blame her. We made it back to the small mountain town just as dawn was smearing pale colors across the sky. Everything looked off, empty, silent, like the world had shifted a fraction of an inch overnight. We parked in front of the only diner open at that hour. Inside, the few people nursing coffees barely glanced at us. But when the dirt and terror on our faces registered, I saw something else flicker in their eyes. Recognition. Fear. The waitress, an older woman, with a tired face and trembling hands, poured us coffee without a word. I noticed her knuckles were raw, like she had been gripping something too tightly for too long. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my palm on the table, startling Leah and the few patrons. "You know about the mines?" I said hoarsely. You knew. The room went deathly still. For a moment, I thought no one would answer. Then the old man at the counter, a wiry figure with a crooked back and a permanent scowl, turned toward me. His voice was like gravel dragged across stone. Should have stayed out, he muttered. That place ain't for the living. I leaned forward. What the hell happened there? He stared at me, his bloodshot eyes full of something older than fear. Back in 1912, the mine was booming, brought money, jobs, but it weren't natural what they found. Deep in the earth, past the mapped tunnels, an old cavern. No one knew how far it stretched. The miners said the walls moved sometimes. Whispered. He took a long pull from his coffee. Then the disappearances started. Men vanishing down there. Equipment breaking for no reason. One night, a collapse. 50 men buried alive. I swallowed hard. The image is already vivid in my mind. They tried to seal it, tried to pretend it never happened. But you can't bury what don't die, right? The waitress spoke up suddenly, her voice trembling. Some say they didn't die. They became part of it, whatever that pit was. It feeds. The old man nodded grimly. Feeds on fear. On life, I sat back, cold all over again. And the woman? I asked, almost whispering. The one near the pit? No one answered for a moment. Then the waitress crossed herself and whispered, Mother of the Deep. Leah squeezed my hand under the table. I realized she was shaking violently. They say she was the first, the old man said. Before the mine, before the town. Some kind of ancient spirit, protector, maybe, once. But when men dug into her resting place, they woke something hungry, something twisted by rage and sorrow. I couldn't breathe. She doesn't let you leave once you've seen her, the waitress said. She follows. We left the diner in a daze. The sunlight felt fake, like a set built to trick us into thinking we were safe. The next few days were a blur. We tried to act normal, tried to pretend it was over. But it wasn't. At night, I heard things, scraping at the windows, whispers under the bed. Once, I woke to find muddy footprints leading from the door to the edge of my bed, and then disappearing. Leah fared worse. She became hollow, jumpy. I caught her staring into mirrors for long stretches, whispering under her breath words I couldn't understand. And sometimes, just sometimes, I saw Mason, in crowds, at the end of long hallways, standing across the street at night, always smiling, always waiting. We needed help, desperately. On the third night, I drove to the old church at the edge of town, a crumbling building that looked abandoned. But the light was on. Inside, a priest sat in a pew, head bowed. He looked up as I entered and nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting me. You saw her? He said simply. I nodded. He gestured for me to sit. There's only one way to sever her hold. You have to return something she gave you. I blinked. She didn't give me anything. The priest smiled sadly. She did. Not an object, a mark. You carry it inside you now. Fear, despair, guilt. That's what she feeds on. I thought of the cavern, the endless black pit, the hands reaching, the way my heart had twisted in terror. Go back, the priest said. Face her. Give back the fear. Only then will you be free. Leah refused to let me go alone. I didn't argue. We had already lost too much. We returned to the mine under a heavy, bruised sky, thunder rumbling low and distant. Every step toward that gaping maw felt like stepping into my own grave. Inside, the tunnels welcomed us like old friends. This time, we didn't run. We walked steadily, flashlights bobbing in the dark, deeper and deeper, until the walls themselves seemed to pulse with a slow, heartbeat-like rhythm. The pit waited, a hungry mouth, and there she was, mother of the deep. She didn't speak this time, didn't move. She simply was. Leah squeezed my hand. I could feel her shaking, but she held firm. I stepped forward. I thought of Mason's smile, Danny's hollow laughter, the miners' broken bodies, the endless guilt and fear. And I let it go. I spoke aloud, my voice steady. You can't have me. Not anymore. At first, nothing happened. Then the cavern shook, dust raining from the ceiling. The pit howled, a deafening, keening wail. Mother of the deep shrieked, a sound of pure rage and sorrow, and began to dissolve into mist, shredded by the very fear she once fed on. The walls cracked, the tunnels collapsed. We ran. The mine behind us crumbled into itself, sealing forever the nightmare beneath. When we finally reached daylight, gasping, bruised, but alive, the sky had cleared. The mountain was silent. And though I would carry the scars forever, I knew we had escaped. For now. Because deep beneath forgotten earth, some horrors never truly die. They just sleep, waiting.